Hello and welcome back to H8 Book Reviews. So, we're going off the cuff for this one because this book is probably the worst book I have ever read in my life. And I don't want to write any more about it because if you've seen over on H8 Politics, I wrote 16,600 words, exactly, it's in the Google Doc, about this book, what it is, its arguments, and why it's stupid. Not to mention the 15 minutes of talking I got from a friend who I also managed to convince to read part of this book and discuss it. So I have put way too many hours into this thing, and I don't want to spend much more effort on it, so I'm just going to get my thoughts out there. Unedited. Well, the video is edited, but the script's not because there is no script. I'm looking into the camera directly right at you. So what is this book? It's written by John Hagee. It is titled In Defense of Israel with a subtitle of The Bible's Mandate for Supporting the Jewish State. Yeah, this is a political book. This is a Zionist book. Its purpose is to advocate for the defense, obviously, and support of the nation of Israel. Specifically, he goes at a lot of it from a Christian perspective, but he also makes plenty of secular arguments. John Hagee actually has written a lot of other books. He has written, I believe, 53 books, only 2 of which are fiction, and some of them are also still about Israel. A lot of them, almost all of them, are theology related. If you're interested in that stuff, I guess you can check him out. I don't recommend it, and he also approaches the Bible from a perspective of biblical literalism and dispensational theology, and I know that's very, very controversial in Christian spaces, and, for good reason, most likely. Now, I don't normally read bad books, right? Like, I've done my fair share of reading very bad books. I have now learned what I like to read, and therefore I buy what I like to read, and I get what I like to read, and I read what I like to read. So most reviews you will ever see me do are going to be average to positive, because I am selecting the books that I enjoy rather than what would necessarily make good content, which I don't know, maybe I should do that, but besides the point. But this book, this was an exception. I saw it and I knew I just had to get it. Oh, and the coolest thing about this, I forgot to mention this in the politics video. It's signed! It's a signed copy. It's signed by Saint Hagee himself. All glory to the IDF. Yeah, I got this from a local church, actually, local evangelical church. I'm surprised they have it. I live in a town of 800 people. I don't know how they got a signed copy, but they did. And I was like, wow, this is something else. I have to see what they have to say. And here we are. And I don't want to discuss here why it's factually wrong or argumentatively wrong or rhetorically wrong, anything of the sort. I want to talk about it literarily. Why is this, from a literary perspective, a bad book? And, it's not a necessarily long read. There's 196 pages, like 2 more for a foreword. It's a normal size. There's a lot of space on each page. There's not a lot of actual content in the book to get through. You can read this in the space of an afternoon. But even with how short it is, it's boring, it's drab, it's dull. Like, I want to call it AI writing for how uninteresting it is, but this was published in 2007. Unless Hagee somehow had access to either time travel or generative AI 18 years ago, I don't think this was written by AI. I wish it was. The sentences, it's not all simple sentences. There are some more complex, some more complicated sentences, but he never does anything with the syntax. He never does anything with grammar. He never does anything interesting with any of the sentences in the book. It's all trite, trivial, average stuff you'll find in a high school essay. Actually, it's more boring than a high school essay. I don't know how he did that. Listen, and I'm not hating on high school essays. There are some really talented essayists out there in middle school, but we're going off of averages here. Sorry if you're that high school essayist and I'm insulting you, but listen, you get it. And it is supposed to be a nonfiction book. I mean, like half of it is just straight up lies. Again, I go over this on politics. Watch that. I know it's like 2 hours. Just So it doesn't really have a plot, but it does have a narrative, because he opens chapter 1 with some sort of emotional opening. No, I'm not going to say it's good, obviously. But the point is that he is constructing a sort of narrative of how he got to where he is and why this is emotionally important for him that we all defend Israel. He opens with his time at the AIPAC conference, and then he moves into his time as a boy, seeing his father cry for the first time when hearing the radio broadcast in 1948 that officially announced the establishment of Israel. But it's just not compelling. It's not emotionally compelling, because a lot of the rhetorical devices he uses are so overused and not used in any creative or really all that impactful way here. He sections off some of his speech at the AIPAC conference as he has the quotations, and then he has the action and the emotional impact, and he has more quotations. He's splitting it up like that, which can be a really excellent literary device, but he doesn't pull it off well. And for example, the transition between chapter 1, which is, it's 1938, again, which is just a horrible chapter name, which is another problem. He is incredibly insensitive to human life and suffering in this book. But the transition between chapter 1 and chapter 2, which is My Lifelong Love for Israel. That's another thing I'll mention. This book wasn't entirely boring. It is so absurd in its arguments and what it states to be clear, definitive facts, that it is honestly just funny. It was hilarious because I can't read this without thinking it's a parody. It is hilariously bad in that regard. The lines that are supposed to be emotionally impactful just don't land, and he uses very cliche sort of lines for this. And yeah, it was written 17 years ago, however many years ago, but it was still cliche then. And it all started, I suppose, when I was 8 years old. It's just not interesting. He uses M dashes a lot. I like seeing M dashes. I know they get a bit of a bad rep now thanks to generative AI and all that. Personally, I would never use AI. If you want to hear some of my thoughts about AI, you can go over to HY Politics. But he does use M dashes, and I think that's cool. But he still uses them in the most bland way possible. Like, he's not using them to make the sentence more interesting. It really seems like he's just using them to use them, because that's what authors do. And I don't know how his other books happen to turn out. I don't know how well his writing has evolved. His last books were published in 2022, so it's entirely possible he has stepped up his game and become better. But this was also written about halfway through his bibliography, I believe. I think he's been writing books for decades at this point, so I don't have much faith if this was the stuff he was still putting out after 20 published books or whatever it may be. It's really just, it's just boring. I can't talk much about it because that's all there is to say about it. That's not political. The only thing there is to talk about it from a literary perspective is that it is uninteresting, trite, conventional, has taken zero risks, has not been impactful in any way, and there's just not anything I can really say about it that's good. I don't like being negative all the time. I try in every one of my reviews to at least say something positive, but I don't really have anything to say about this book. There's not even a line I like. There's no creative line or beautiful line or anything of the sort in this entire book, which is really disappointing, honestly. Like, how can you write an entire book and not at least want to, one time, make something interesting with one of your sentences? Not a single bit of creative energy feels like it was put into this book because it's political. Even if he tries to make a narrative of his sort of story for why he's writing this book, even if he wants that to be emotionally impactful, because he goes back to the little boy idea when he was seeing his father cry. He ends the book back at the AIPAC conference about how he saw himself as a little boy, but it doesn't mean anything. The narrative was only in there because that gets more sales. Not for any artistic merit, not for any literary merit. It was in there solely to push his ideological beliefs. I don't really care to talk about this any longer. It doesn't have any worth. I will not be putting a link to the physical edition in the description below. I know I like to normally do that so you can support an author, but I believe it would be ethically irresponsible of me to suggest in any way that you support this author. However, a free PDF to it will be available in the description if you'd like to go check that out so you can read it for yourself. Just don't buy it. I won't stop you, but I definitely don't recommend it. And it's not like you need to support him anyway. John Hagee, the pastor, by the way, who in this book criticizes people for not giving to the poor, has a net worth of $5 million. I brought that up at least 7 times in the politics video. It's so hypocritical of him. And the last page in the book is trying to sell you something. Yeah, everyone loves advertisements in their book. I think I'm going to give this book a 1 out of 10. Big shocker there. I know, you were just fully expecting this to be a masterpiece. I'm sorry I disappointed you all, but it's just boring, if not for the fact that it is hilariously bad. That's its only redeeming quality if you read it as a piece of satire of Zionism. That's the only thing it has going for it. And with that, I can finally be done talking about this thing. I have been working on these related projects on this thing for about 2 weeks now. Honestly, probably even 3 weeks now, and everyone who knows me has heard me just ranting about this thing. But I can finally put it on the shelf and forget about it. Oh, and every mark here is something I didn't like, and I didn't even mark a third of them. I can finally put it away. I can finally forget about it. So this has been a 2-8 Book Reviews. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to hear me do something a little more structured, stay tuned for next week. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that sort of stuff. I get a hit of dopamine every time the numbers go up, and that's always nice. That's needed after something like this. Or if you want to see me do more unstructured stuff, just off the cuff, whatever I have to say, because it's a little more comedic or whatever you think, let me know in the comments. I'm down to try more stuff out. I mean, I have, what, like 43 subscribers? I'm not exactly in a position to say no. But never stop reading. Unless you're trying to read this, please put it down immediately.